Hello everyone, I am Golden Gamer, and I'm here to tell you a story. I hope you're ready to continue on to the next chapter of this little journey. So, without further ado, here we go. Welcome to your forever nightmare. Those were the last words that J-Boy could remember. Surrounded in the darkness, those words continued to plague his mind, repeating itself over and over again. He had tried to wake up, thinking it was all a dream, but it never was. Until J-Boy did, in fact, wake up. But not where he expected to be. Another pitch-black room. His pitch-black room. Had he finally escaped that nightmare of a place? He stood up, frantically trying to get a glimpse at something, anything that would help him understand what had happened. How long he'd been gone for. Hours? Days? Months? Years? He had no idea. All he knew was that Zod was out there, somewhere, acting as a puppet to his own body. Maybe he could go and warn everyone before it was too late. Suddenly, there was laughter. Constant, maniacal laughter all around him as the room slowly began to shift. A look of shock formed across J-Boy's face as Zod stood in front of him. He had never made it out. He was toyed with. Played like a fiddle in Zod's endless game. J-Boy dropped to his knees and sobbed. His tears filled with blood, just like before. Zod began to laugh even harder than before.
Oh, little J-Boy, did you really think you had actually escaped?
Zod exclaimed.
This was never going to end well for you. It would only be pleasure for me and torture for you.
As he said those words, his neck started to twist, just like he had done before, when all this began. This time, however, he coiled his neck until it reached J-Boy's face. Left defenseless, all he could do was cry.
Tears? Now? In your final moments? You're pathetic, and you always will be, Zod
Shouted. You've
been to my world, so maybe I should come and visit yours. Now then, since I've had my appetizer, I think it's time for the main course.
J-Boy tried to speak, but couldn't. His mouth was shut. Main course? What did he mean by that? Suddenly, it became abundantly clear what it was that Zod meant by main course. He began to open his mouth as wide as it could. As he did so, his arms stretched out and grabbed J-Boy by the arms, lifting him off the ground. He then started to pull his arms and shattered them both into pieces. J-Boy couldn't even scream anymore. He was numb to everything at this point.
Bon appetit, Zod
Said, grinning despite his mouth being wide open. J-Boy closed his eyes and accepted his fate. And with one large chomp, everything faded once again. Was that a scream that he just heard? Mulazy couldn't really tell. But all he knew was that he had woken up to some kind of sound. The matter of what it was didn't really concern him at the moment. He sat up from his bed, looking around. He could still hear the ringing from whatever sound woke him up. As he looked around, Mulazy noticed that, for some reason, his PC had remained on.
I could have sworn I turned that off.
Mulazy said, quizzically glancing at the screen in front of him.
Huh. I guess I didn't.
He stood up and walked over to the PC, turned it off, and went back to bed. As he closed his eyes, knowing that there was work to be done the next day, he could almost hear that sound again, this time much quieter than before. As Mulazy rose from his bed, he immediately hopped onto his computer. It was time to work on his fan game. He was very close to finishing everything, and after all the comments and compliments given to him by Nick Rick Games, he felt as confident as ever. As he opened up his files, ready to begin, all of a sudden, the game closed.
What just happened?
Mulazy exclaimed. He tried to open it up again, but to no avail. It kept turning off.
Oh, that son of a...
he said in a furious tone, kicking the desk that the computer rested on.
I guess I'll have to figure this out after school. I'm gonna be late if I don't leave now.
As he walked to school, Mulazy started to think. What was that sound from last night? It sounded like a scream, but maybe he was just imagining things. Something felt off. Not only that, but he had been messaging J-Boy as well and hadn't heard from him in days. Mulazy felt a little concerned. He checked his phone to see if J-Boy had responded, and to his surprise, he did. Mulazy looked at the message. It wasn't normal. It was all errors. Surely something was wrong, but J-Boy typed again. Behind you. Mulazy looked behind him in a panic, but nobody was there. A feeling of dread rose within him. He couldn't help but feel like something or someone was following him. Maybe J-Boy was playing a prank? He put his phone back in his pocket and kept going. But something seemed wrong with where Mulazy was going. He passed by the same mailbox over and over again, and had only realized that after the third time. Was he going in circles? It didn't make sense. Then the clouds came in, and the sky was dark. It hadn't even been an hour. Couldn't have been nighttime already. Mulazy reached into his pocket, looking for his phone to use as a light source, but as he reached into his pocket, he realized the phone was gone.
Huh?
Shouted Mulazy.
I could have sworn I just put my phone in here.
And that's when he saw him. A man in the distance, wearing a black hoodie, and holding up a small, rectangular-shaped object. His phone. Mulazy's phone. How did he get it? There was no way it could have been stolen.
Look what I've got,
The man said.
You want it back? Come over here, and I'll give it to you.
Mulazy didn't seem to trust him. His voice was raspy, almost like he had smoked a cigarette or two. But he needed his phone, so Mulazy approached the man cautiously. He reached out his hand to give Mulazy the phone, but let go of it, and dropped it on the ground.
Oops, my bad,
The man exclaimed. The phone shattered into pieces.
What's wrong with you?
Mulazy shouted.
You're buying me a new one right now.
The figure removed the hood he was wearing, and Mulazy instantly recognized the man. It was Nick Rick Games. Dominic. What was he doing here? But he looked off. Something about him screamed danger. Maybe it was the messed up hair, the bulgy eyes, or the smirk on his face. But Mulazy was worried.
Nick, why do you look like that?
He began to laugh. Mulazy started to panic. Why was he laughing? What was going on? His smirk began to grow even more until it covered the bottom of his face.
You moron. Did you really think that Nick Rick Games, your hero, would be here? You must be extremely gullible to think that.
Hey, what is going on here, Nick?
Mulazy shouted.
Stop that, you're freaking me out.
He laughed even harder.
See, Mulazy, I'm not the guy you know. I'm not Nick Rick Games. I'm something much worse.
Mulazy couldn't understand. Something much worse? What did he mean? And who was this?
What are you?
Mulazy asked, stumbling on his words.
Oh, me? I'm your worst nightmare. And if you're wondering where your friend is,
He reached into his pocket and grabbed out a horrible sight.
I think I found him.
Mulazy screamed. J-Boy's head? What did this monster do to him? Even worse, he stuck his hand into the severed head and began to move J-Boy's mouth like a puppet on a string.
Now tell me, what do you and your little friend here have in common?
Mulazy didn't want to answer the question. He was petrified. He needed to leave. But his legs wouldn't let him. He was stuck.
You don't know?
Said Zod.
I'll tell you. You're both going to be victims of Zod.
Suddenly, Mulazy felt his legs gain composure. He could move. He started running, all while Zod laughed. He turned to look back and watched as this creature in the face of his hero took his hand out of the severed head of his best friend and ripped it in two. Mulazy turned back around. He had to keep running. No looking back. No looking up. No looking down. He had to run. Run as far as he could go. But his foot caught a brick, and he began to stumble. Mulazy collapsed onto the sidewalk. That seemed like the only thing that was real in all of this. The street lights began to flicker, on and off, on and off, on and off, and every time it did, Mulazy could see Zod getting even closer. Until they went out. Zod was gone. Mulazy began to cry. What could he do? He reached into his pocket, realizing he had his phone in there again. How did that happen? Mulazy didn't care. All he needed was some light to see. As he turned his flashlight on, he realized that Zod hadn't disappeared. He was right in front of him.
Boo!
Mulazy screamed as Zod began to laugh once more. Only this time, opening his mouth while laughing.
Bon appetit!
And that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope you all enjoyed. Stay tuned for part 2. I'll see you next time.
Guys, before I go, I just want to say shout out to Mulazy and Golden Gamer for the help. And if you want to see their channels, link in the description. And Mulazy made a behind the scenes technically, so go check it out. Links are in the description below. Bye bye.